Hello and welcome to On Watch by MarketWatch. I'm Jeremy Owens. It's Thanksgiving this week, a holiday meant for family and friends to gather and just eat a ton of good food. But it's also the day before the official kickoff of another gluttonous time of the year, the holiday shopping season. And this year, the biggest question for holiday shopping lists isn't what's the hottest toy or is this new iPhone really worth it? Instead, it's what should I buy before Donald Trump's tariffs kick in? You see, President-elect Trump has promised to install tariffs on goods being shipped into the U.S. at varying degrees, and price increases are likely as a result. So we asked reporter Hannah Aaron Lang to explain what could happen and what you should buy now before the price tags get bigger.
Well, just to ground us in the basics here, because I think there's been some confusion on this based on the way that Donald Trump has framed this in his campaign and in the transition. A tariff is essentially a tax on imported goods paid by the company that is doing the importing. So this is something that would be paid by U.S. businesses, not foreign companies. And, we've heard from economists, from executives at these companies that this is ultimately going to raise consumer prices. In terms of what this looks like and how Trump implements this, it's likely that he can do it without the help of Congress. He's pledged to address this right away. So it seems like this is something we could expect very shortly once Trump takes office.
Yeah, and as those tariffs cause retailers to face cost increases, economists do expect that those costs will trickle down to consumers in the form of inflation. But it's certainly not the aim of the tariffs. What does Trump want these tariffs to accomplish?
I think it's important to remember as well that Donald Trump ran on a platform of addressing some very real economic concerns of Americans over the past couple of years. Affordability, standards of living, frustration with the economy, and tariffs, though they have goals like revitalizing American manufacturing, bettering the United States' position in the world of international trade, reducing the deficit. Tariffs don't get at those affordability concerns directly. If anything, they could have the opposite effect by giving companies an incentive to raise prices because of their higher costs.
Yeah, and I want to hone in on the companies a little bit. What have we heard in terms of what they expect these tariffs to do?
I spoke with the National Retail Federation recently about the impact that tariffs could have. And they told me that this will really vary from company to company in terms of when these price increases might hit and how severe they will be. What we do know is we've heard from several major companies already about the impact this could have for their products and their customers. So Walmart, AutoZone, Columbia Sportswear, they've all pointed to the potential of raising prices for consumers if these tariffs go into effect. Other companies, e.l.f. Beauty, Lowe's, have talked about how they're trying to prepare for the impact of this policy, looking at their supply chains, trying to mitigate risk before Trump takes office, that type of thing. So we know that lots of companies are already making preparations, but the impact on each specific item or category of goods is going to depend on each specific firm, how reliant they are on production in places like China, where Trump has proposed a tariff as large as 60% on imported goods.
Well, Hannah, we've got holiday shopping coming up. What goods do we really expect to see price increases next year from these tariffs? Where can people kind of front run those tariffs as they're doing their holiday shopping?
I think it's important to remember that we're talking about a 10 to 20% tariff on all U.S. imports, which could have a pretty wide-ranging impact on different types of companies and goods. So it's hard to say what this wouldn't touch given that type of proposal. But I think where consumers might feel the most impact is on those pricier electronics. There's a report from the Consumer Technology Association about the potential price impact on common electronics like laptops, smartphones. And, according to their analysis, we could see the price of a laptop go up as much as $357 if these tariffs are implemented to the extent that Trump has proposed. So I think that any of those electronics, smartphones, tablets, household appliances as well, washing machines, refrigerators, if you've been thinking about getting a replacement for a while now, or that you'll need a replacement within the next year or so, I think this is a great time to be looking at that and maybe replacing that sooner rather than later if you can afford it. Other goods that could be impacted, smaller purchases, toys, apparel, things like that.
Yeah, and in getting to both the large and small, cars could be more expensive because car parts could get more expensive. But I think the big question is how long it will take for consumers to actually see these price increases on the ground.
This is not something that would happen overnight. We are talking global supply chains here. Companies often have inventory, stock on hand that can be for weeks or months. In terms of when these tariffs could take effect, it could take months, but there's a lot that we don't know right now. I think retailers are relatively unsure how much it will look like, what Trump has talked about on the campaign trails. He has pledged to move on tariffs very swiftly, so we could see that happen very early in his presidential term. But it could take months before we see those effects, and it will depend, of course, on each specific company, the type of goods, and other factors like that.
So you may be wondering if you should go ahead and buy some of those goods that are likely to get more expensive. I know I am. I'm probably going to update my smartphone, and that wasn't on my shopping list before the election, and it is now. But the fact is, holiday shopping starts a lot earlier than Black Friday now.
People are calling it Black November. The deals started basically November 1st. It's really many, many, many weeks of deals coming out.
That's Katie Hill, founding and managing editor of MarketWatch Picks and a shopping expert. I sat down with her to get some insight on where and how to shop for deals this holiday season, because I felt like deals have been piling up in my inbox for this entire month already. I wanted to know, if I'm looking for the best deal, do Black Friday and Cyber Monday still even matter?
If you miss Black Friday, if you miss Cyber Monday, there's still going to be plenty of deals in December because the retailers, they want to move that inventory. So the only reason to really go on Black Friday is if something might run out of stock. You might not want to wait till Cyber Monday. If there's a limited quantity or something, you're going to want to jump on that on Black Friday. But yeah, I mean, these days are all merged together, and really the whole shopping season is now merged together.
Yeah, and I feel like the elongated nature of the Black November, I feel like I'm sometimes stuck in this should I buy, should I not throughout the entire month. What I used to do was buy NBA 2K every Black Friday. This is the only video game I play, me and one of my other sad suburban dads. And I always bought that on Black Friday because they would go half off. And last year I bought it a week before Black Friday. This year I bought it 2 weeks before. But, I hesitated because it's like, oh, well, what if they put it on a better deal? And I just feel like there is that like sitting there. Am I actually getting the best deal when we see this get elongated?
You speak to a point where you really have to price check. You might think something's a good deal, right? We see that retailers maybe like inflate the price a few weeks later so that they can slash it to a seemingly bigger discount. So it's like for my team who covers deals a lot, Camel is one of those price comparison websites. You can see what was the historical price and then say, hey, this actually is the best price of the year. Or, hey, no, not really. Honey is one of those browser extensions that can kind of show you what the prices are like on other sites. I also this is simple, but Google Shopping sometimes, if you know exactly what you want, you can put the product in and kind of see what it might be priced at other places. So those are just like every year the tried and true sort of hacks that someone who wants to shop on Black Friday or Black November should really try it out.
Yeah, and there might be better deals on some of these categories at other times, right? Like you said, there's Black November. I mean, we don't really get to Christmas until late December. Like there's a lot of shopping pathway here until the actual holiday. And there might be better deals than Black Friday or Cyber Monday coming up.
That's exactly right. So things like fitness equipment and beauty products, those tend to go on more sale in January, actually. So look, if you need that now, you might find some deals on Black Friday. It's not like, oh no, they're not going to be any of them. But those in general as categories, better in January. And then things like power tools and hardware, you see those huge sales right around Father's Day. They tend to be deeper discounted overall for the category than they are on Black Friday and Cyber Monday. And then toys, you'll see they start aggressively putting sales on toys in December. So although they're Black Friday deals and toys, sometimes because they know this is the time we got to get these toys off the shelf. Like if they haven't sold, you start to see a lot of toy deals going deeper into December. So that's something to consider too for people with kids or who are gifting kids.
Well, Katie, thank you so much for your time today. Personally, I'm looking forward to sitting out Black Friday and Cyber Monday and getting out for Small Business Saturday, where the money will stay in my local community, and giving anything I have left on Giving Tuesday to nonprofits. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, we'll talk about big retail chains and how they're preparing for the holiday shopping season, as well as tariffs. Welcome back. Before the break, we talked about tariffs and how you can prepare for them this holiday season. But I was also curious about how large retailers are preparing for tariffs and how they might affect our shopping experience this holiday season, as well as the takeaways on consumer spending and retail stocks moving forward. So I called up retail expert Nikki Baird, VP of Strategy and Product at Aptos, a company that provides retail companies with technology solutions. She said retailers are preparing for tariffs in a few ways.
Retailers seem to be preparing for tariffs more by shifting production around to other countries. So for those that are centered on China, we've seen already some movement into like Indonesia or India. We've also seen preparation to do that. So I know some of the brand manufacturers, particularly in the apparel side, consumer electronics is a little bit more constrained because you do need a bit of a skilled workforce in order to assemble electronics. And you don't need quite as much skill from that perspective for apparel. So I think they're looking at shifting kind of more flexibly and faster. And they seem like they've made lots of plans to do so. I'll say one area where they don't seem to be interested in shifting production is back to the US. Most of them that I've talked to have said the cost difference is still too high. Even if it's a 20% tariff in, a non-Chinese country, then it's still going to be less of a price increase than if they really tried to move production back to the US.
And how are retailers expecting this to impact this holiday shopping season?
I think this holiday season is going to turn out better than original predictions. And I do think the election had some impact on that. I've seen a lot written about, hey, at least it's certain and we know what the future holds for us. But I also see a lot of advice on, hey, go out and buy consumer electronics, for example, because tariffs are coming and that's going to hit that particular category really hard. So I do think there will be some consumers out there who pull in spending that aren't necessarily holiday gift spend that they had planned, but pulling that in expectation that things that they were planning on buying next year are going to be more expensive and they want to kind of beat the rush, if you will. So I'll be very interested to see how that pans out. But I think as a net result, we'll definitely see that the holiday season turns out better than people expected.
Well, you're confirming what we've talked about with our own staff earlier in this episode, where we discussed especially electronic gadgets, as well as clothes, toys, some of these things that we really could see Trump's tariffs affect. And if you've got a kid who's graduating high school in the spring and going to college next fall, and they're going to need a new laptop, you may want to look at the deals right now and jump on those with the thought that they may be much more expensive once those tariffs are baked in sometime next year.
It's still an open question about how much impact it will have, but even if it has little impact on actual inflationary prices next year, the perception that could happen is definitely affecting behavior right now.
And is that a concern economically that we might see consumer spending fall off a little bit next year?
Yeah. I think that typically January and February are very slow months anyway, but we may see a more drastic dip because it will be spend that they were planning for the first half or first quarter of 25 and it's landing in 24. Whether retailers fall for that in terms of their perception of what 2025 will hold for them, I think will be interesting to see, because a lot of them do make a lot of judgment calls about the investments that they're going to make in furthering their own store experiences based off of how the holiday goes.
Well, we talked about this a lot from an economic side, right? The state of the American consumer, there's been a lot of agitation over the past years. We've seen certain companies run into rough spots and say, well, the consumer is not spending like they used to. But we haven't seen actual consumer spending fall off writ large. So what is actually happening right now as we go into the holiday shopping season with how much the American consumer is spending and where they're choosing to spend it?
It's a lot like it was last year at this point in time, just from the perspective of consumers say that they're very unconfident and yet they keep spending. I mean, for the last 2 years, I think, going into this one as the third, I've been saying consumers are going to run out of money and they're going to stop spending because there's nothing left, right? Like we see debt rising, we see delinquencies rising, cost of living is really expensive and it's eating into discretionary budgets. And yet consumers keep spending.
Yeah, you just walked through my whole past year, Nikki. I mean, I sat there the entire time going, the consumer spending just can't keep going like this. But then every time we get the actual writ large consumer spending numbers and they're not falling.
Yeah, it comes in okay. And October this year was actually really good, really, really good. Beat inflation good. I mean, for sure, we still see some shift in behavior. So overall, there's this downward trend. We're looking for deals. We're buying smaller luxuries instead of bigger luxuries, or we're delaying big ticket purchases and spending on smaller things that will fill the bill in between. So there is still a lot of that down trading behavior that's happening. Walmart, of course, took big credit for that in their quarterly results, but you can't just look at one retailer's results and go, here it is. This is it. It's the end.
Yeah, like with Target, for example. Target just reported a rough quarter. Stock fell about 20% after earnings. And the CEO gets on the earnings call and says the consumer is being very careful with whether they're spending their money. And I'm thinking, well, the other earnings we saw didn't say that, though.
I do feel like Target's results were more a Target thing rather than an overall industry or consumer health thing. And as more of these results are rolling in, that seems to be getting validated. So Target was more vulnerable because they have more exposure on the discretionary spend side, whereas Walmart can stay strong on the grocery side. But, one other piece of this that I'm really interested in is Walmart has been undergoing a completely different technology investment strategy than Target has been undergoing. And I also feel like Walmart may be showing some of the benefits of that investment that we haven't seen that same level of investment from Target.
Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to get into, is those read-throughs on like, why is money shifting from one place to the other, right? Walmart was struggling about a year ago. Like this is something that we continue to see, these cycles of consumers kind of going to one place versus the other. And while the spending stays the same, they're kind of spending at different places on different things. What's driving that? What do you see as really moving customers from one place to the next and causing those shifts?
Yeah, I do think that in the last couple of years, we have overall seen an erosion of loyalty. So it's easier than ever for consumers to switch. It's easier for them to see and understand the opportunity to switch, right? Like there's the transparency online, there's price comparison websites and all kinds of tools that'll help you kind of make judgment calls about those things. I think for Walmart, they had this kind of windfall of higher income shoppers in October, but they've had those kind of windfalls before, and they've never really successfully kept those shoppers. So we'll see if they do that this time.
Yeah, we discussed Target not having a great quarter, stock falling. We discussed Walmart's problems in the past and how they had a good quarter. Where's the rest of the retail sector headed? Where is the money kind of trending there?
Yeah, we're seeing improvement in lots and lots of areas. I think fashion and apparel is one in particular that historically has faced challenges, and that they're all having really great quarters, Target aside. Even home improvement, I think it's funny to see the headlines because they've really struggled. First of all, lots of consumers did lots of home improvement projects when they were stuck at home during the pandemic anyways. You have to recover from that. But also because interest rates are high, those big ticket items that are typically financed, those are the kinds of things that consumers are kind of pushing off purchasing. And that has really hurt the home improvement sector. But even they were like, it was actually okay. We had an okay quarter.
Yeah, Home Depot and Lowe's seemed fine. They're still reckoning that money up.
Right. Not fabulous, but okay, like not bad either. So yeah, I think overall we're going to see that performance was better across the board, with those outliers where I think there's a mismatch between their strategy and their investments and consumer expectations.
And going back to consumers, we talk a lot about the disconnect between the economic data and how consumers actually feel. And as we talked about, the data shows us that people are spending despite feeling really bad about the economy. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you reconcile these two things?
Part of the challenge in unwrapping consumer spend and the fact that they keep spending, I think it is that you have to look at multiple dimensions. So yes, we see strain, we see where the debt is rising and all of that, but also wages have been rising. And while that also has been applied unevenly, if you look at it on the whole, wages have still been rising a little bit faster than inflation. It hasn't been a smooth ride, but for the most part, we're at a point where wages still came in higher than inflation. And I think most of them have a mentality of, while my wages may have slightly outpaced inflation, that's just keeping up. That's not actually getting ahead. And I expect to get ahead at some point. And I think a lot of the consumer frustration with the economy is that feeling, not that they're getting hammered by inflation, because then you would see a drop off in consumer spending. You would see much more pullback from that perspective. But what we're seeing instead is really more the mental part of the picture of, I expected to be further ahead than I am now. And because of inflation, I'm just barely keeping up. And I'm not happy about that.
Well, Nikki, thank you so much for joining us. We'll have you back on to talk again.
Sounds like a plan.
Before we go, it's time for what we're watching. a look at the news you need to know for the rest of the week and beyond. Speaking of retail earnings, Macy's released some interesting info Monday morning. The large retailer delayed its earnings report, which was originally scheduled for Tuesday, and revealed that up to $154 million in expenses had been hidden by one former employee. These expenses were part of a metric that Macy's executives had touted, the company's ability to boost profit by cutting expenses. Shares fell, as Macy's also revealed that sales declined from last year. Donald Trump announced late last week that he would nominate Scott Bessent as Secretary of the Treasury. Bessent once ran the hedge fund of prominent Democratic donor George Soros, but has recently been outspoken in his support of Trump. He's laid out a 3-3-3 plan for the U.S. economy, in which he says the U.S. should aim for 3% GDP growth, a budget deficit that runs about 3% of GDP, and production of an additional 3 million oil barrels per day, or its equivalent. Lastly, make sure to check out the raft of economic data coming this week that could give signals about how retailers and consumers are faring heading into the holiday shopping season. Inflation numbers, retail inventories, and pending home sales are among the numbers being released today. Check out our live blog on MarketWatch.com for the results. And that's it for this episode. To keep following the latest financial news, head to MarketWatch.com. Have questions about the news and the economy? We want to hear them. You can reach us at onwatch@MarketWatch.com. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, and please do. If you like what you heard, please leave us a rating or review. It really helps others discover the show. The show is hosted by me, Jeremy Owens, and produced by Alexis Moore. Isaac Gaines mixed this episode. Melissa Haggerty is the executive producer. We'll be back next week with a new episode, and until then, we'll be watching.